Hello and welcome to the Lupus LA Your Story, Our Fight podcast. We've been doing this now a little over a year, some 25 odd episodes, and I want to know from you, the audience, who've been listening for a year, or even if you've just been listening to one or two episodes, what you think. So let us know how you like the podcast. Go to lupusla.org. Find us on social media at LupusLA. Give us your opinions. What do you like? What do you don't like? You hate the sound of my voice? I don't know. Whatever it is, we want to hear from you. And also, if you know somebody who would potentially be a good guest for the Your Story, Our Fight podcast, let us know that too. Today, on this episode, we are going to talk to an old friend of mine, Nell Teare. Meaning we've been friends for a long time, Nell. I don't want to bring age into this, but Nell is an award-winning director, writer, producer, actress. She wrote a children's book. She is just super dynamic and has so much to talk about. And welcome to the podcast,
Adam,
Nell.
thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I want to talk, I sort of ask everybody right at the beginning, give me your basic sort of the nickel version of your lupus story and your lupus diagnosis, and then we'll sort of jump in from there.
Well, I think mine is actually more common than I thought growing up. So I developed lupus at age 11 and woke up swollen, stiff in bed, couldn't move anything, called for my father. You know, we go to the emergency room, we run all these tests, and they come back with, oh, well, this is just what happens when she's stressed out at 11. And I'm like, okay. So for 10 years, I took so much Benadryl that I don't know how I stayed awake for most of my adolescence, but I did. My best friend would actually start bringing Benadryl with her to high school, because that's kind of when it even got worse. You know, my hands would be swollen, or my lip would swell up, or my earlobe would swell down, just the weirdest stuff. And she would just throw me Benadryl like across the room. So cut to, I'm at NYU. I'm doing a show in New York. It's a pretty heavy dancing show. And my knee swells up to the size of a watermelon. And my choreographer and director say, you've obviously torn your meniscus. You can't do this. And I'm like, no. I promise it doesn't hurt that bad. I'm used to this. It's fine. It's not that. And they're like, absolutely not. You have to see an orthopedic doctor. And I said, okay. So I go and we do an MRI, and he said, your knee's perfect. So let me ask you another question. Do you ever get rashes? And I'm like, yeah, I get rashes all the time. Yes. Absolutely. He's like, okay, all right. So I go, and, as fate would have it, like 2 days before I was supposed to see the rheumatologist in New York, Dr. Chiopoulos, my first rheumatologist, I broke out in a rash, like perfect textbook all over my body, the classic butterfly, everything. And I walked in and she went, oh, okay, so you have lupus. And then I was diagnosed, and I've been on Plaquenil for the majority of my adult life. And then I met Dr. Wallace and met you, and when I moved out to LA, and he's been keeping me in remission, he and Dr. Lee, for a while.
So you're probably one of the first people we've had diagnosed by an orthopedist. So that's, but I think that's part of the lupus story, is that, not everybody picks up on it. And I think that's, I guess, were you seeing your regular doctor between, so when you got the actual diagnosis,
21.
You were how old? Like 21. So really like 10 years there where you were having these periodic issues. And no other doctor got a hold of it.
I mean, and I think about it now, and my father was, obviously it scared him to death when I was little. And then as I got older, it was just something I learned to deal with. I kind of thought, oh, well, this is my body. This is what I do when I'm stressed. And which I think is an interesting thing with lupus in the first place, because it is such a mental disease as well. You don't know what you wake up and see in the morning, or what's going to happen in the afternoon. Or I thought of myself so much as like Gumby when I was growing up, because it was like one day Nell's, I felt beautiful, and then the next morning I would wake up and I would be swollen and rashy, and like my eyes were, it was so difficult as a teenager. And then of course as an actor, um stage was better because you're at a distance, but when I started to do film and television, I was terrified of early morning calls because I didn't know, I had nightmares about like getting to set and they're being like, well, this is not who we hired. We can't have this woman on camera.
So, so talk about that a little bit, and talk about sort of the stress of choosing following your dreams and choosing a career like that, and then realizing that it has to be part of your everyday equation. What does that do to you in terms of just that stress level, which obviously then
Well,
it's
yeah,
a vicious
absolutely.
circle.
Absolutely. Because, thinking makes it so, or whatever. So if you're sitting around and terrified that you're going to have a flare up on a big day or a big event or whatever, most likely you're going to kind of talk your body into it. Right. So it was difficult. I mean, I, it was difficult, obviously on a work level, but it was difficult dating. It was difficult, you know what I mean? Just, you're always feeling like your body's going to betray you, or your face is going to betray you, or skin is going to betray you, or your heart sac, or I mean, you're just like, which organ or which joint is going to affect my ability to just do what I need to do today. um the 10 years that I was not diagnosed were actually, I think, helpful to me because I learned how to live with it or manage it. And so you kind of grow up thinking like, oh, okay, well, some days I'm pretty and some days I have energy, and other days I'm not so pretty and I don't have so much energy. And oh, well, I'm just myself. So I can't, you kind of learn how to just push through things. And I think that has been a huge service to me as an artist and a freelance artist, someone who has to kind of campaign for themselves day in and day out. It doesn't matter if I'm tired. It doesn't matter if I'm, feeling less than or whatever. I still have, I built a muscle to be able to do that. And I think it's something that those of us who have these autoimmune diseases that are trickier and are not visible necessarily, to others, we have this resilience, we have this ability to kind of push through things. So yeah, I think that those 10 years where I was not diagnosed were helpful in that. And when I did get diagnosed, there was a lot of guilt in my family, predominantly with my father, because growing up, I was in a tumultuous situation anyway, but I think my dad, he was very reluctant to say that I had lupus or to agree with the diagnosis, because it made him feel like he had somehow let me down as a little girl. So
So that's interesting because I think a lot of people it would be the opposite of the sense like, oh, finally we figured this out, as opposed to, but I think that's so tell me how that has impacted your relationship now post
well,
diagnosis, or
yeah, yeah,
how did
yeah.
that
I think
change?
that it took him a while, it took him like a year to sort of come to terms with it. And then of course after that it was like everything he could read, don't you ever have a Diet Coke again, and don't you ever do this again, and that kind of stuff, because he was just very, then it became something that he could support me in. And obviously the most supportive father on the planet, I mean, every dream, everything. Um, but I think that it was, I think he felt very guilty about it. And so for the first, year, it was like, well, I
Hmm.
don't know.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't think it's lupus. I
Right.
mean, organs don't get
Right.
involved and da 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 da, you know. And I'm like, well, actually, my largest organ
Yeah.
is always involved, in it, you know.
Right.
So anyway, but no, it took him a minute to come around, but once he did, and he loved Dr. Wallace, and you know, yeah. So, but it did take him.
And how did your sense of self change once you got your
I was
diagnosis? And
so
what
relieved.
was there anything that
I was so relieved, because it is like you're saying. For me, it was like, oh, I'm not just this like completely neurotic human being whose stress can change their body. You know what I mean? It was very yeah, it put me at ease in a way that I can't explain, you know. And then to have the medicine that really worked was like, you know, and it works for me. I mean, the hydroxychloroquine, which is, you know, the generic Plaquenil, um, is something that it's like a magical thing for my body. It really does just tone it down. And I think another thing that I love is that I am maybe one of the most overactive, energetic, you know, human beings. And it's just makes total sense that my immune system would also be overactive. So to have something that can
right?
like calm it down.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah, no, I think that does give you a sense of relief, but I also think 10 years of not knowing probably also sort of changes your future mindset. You know, I mean, the relief is one thing, but what about your coping mechanisms? What is or not only your coping mechanisms, but you know what you said to the outside world. You know, did you feel like you could now, okay, I could really be me
well,
to the
that's
world?
interesting because no, I didn't want I didn't want people to know that I was dealing with an autoimmune disease, because that makes you a liability in some people's eyes, right? Like, well, what if we hire for this and she gets sick and can't do it? Or you know, so I was always very nervous about that. In my 30s, I said, like, forget it, whatever, it doesn't matter. I am who I am, and I've been in this industry since I'm 6 years old, and I know what my body is capable of, and I know what I'm able to, you know, I can always rise to the occasion, I guess, is the, you know, was the thing that I finally told myself, and then started to shift my thought process on the whole disease in the first place, which is like, I survive something every day, right? Like, I wake up and I'm here and I'm working and I work so hard, and I have the like it I kind of I learned what a wonderful skill I had to be able to like show up for myself despite how I was feeling or how I felt I looked, or you know, I mean, there's so many aspects of this disease that people don't, you know, they don't understand, like the depression and the, you know, just the fatigue. Like when you get bone tired like that, it's hard to describe that to somebody, because, you know, you're not wasting away necessarily. In my case, the disease, you know, I look like myself sort of most of the time. But, you know, you wake up and you're like, uh-oh, and you can feel it, and thank God for steroids, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah. No, and I think too. Um, Luckily, the business has changed. You know, when I came to LA 20 years ago, and I was an actor, and I was sort of had this dilemma because I was very public about my involvement with lupus. I always have been, you know, dating back, and so I didn't really have a chance to hide it. But I could tell that there was definitely an industry stigma about, you know, because these are high stakes hires you're making. You know, and so I think that seems to have changed a bit. I mean, that's one of the, I think, original missions of Lupus
what,
LA was, you know, bring
yeah,
Hollywood to the table so that we could we could sort of show the world that people like you and I and others like us, are out there. And I think, luckily, I think that's changing a little bit. I'm going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to you a little bit more about what you're doing and all the things you've been able to accomplish since your lupus diagnosis.
Okay.
So we'll be right back.
Lupus LA's fellowship program is an essential part of ensuring the training of future rheumatologists. The nation is experiencing a serious shortage of pediatric rheumatologists. Today, there are approximately 300,000 children diagnosed with rheumatic conditions in the United States, but only about 250 practicing pediatric rheumatologists to meet this tremendous need. Call 310-657-5667 or visit our website at lupusla.org to support the efforts of Lupus LA.
Welcome back to the Your Story, Our Fight podcast from Lupus LA. We are talking to Nell Teare, director, producer, actress, children's book writer, and lupus patient. So I want to hear about the children's book, but first tell me, I know when you and I met, I think you had just started to talk more publicly about your lupus diagnosis, and you joined us, I remember, for a few of our very first Lupus LA poker events, when, people could actually be in the same room with each other. And, but I know I know you were still in that struggle of who knows, who doesn't know kind of a thing. So tell me about that time.
I think that, so when I came out here, I had a really bad flare up, and when I moved here from New York, and that's how I found Dr. Wallace. And when I got into the office with him, he, of course, in his very Dr. Wonderful Wallace way, was like, I think you need to be a part of our foundation. I think you need to do some, I want you to do this, this, and this. And I think Adam could use some help on this poker night, And so, and we got to talking, and I think that was a big part of me embracing a community of people, especially in the arts. It made me go, oh, we're all doing this. It doesn't, it's not something, I don't think I was ever ashamed of it, but I didn't want anyone to ever pity me or think that I couldn't do something because of it, because I had for 10 years didn't know I had anything, and I did everything, and it never kept me from doing that. But to be in that group and to become a part of Lupus LA, it gave me a confidence that I hadn't really had before. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And I mean, you were a big help to us. You had a really great network of people and friends, and to see them coming to support you, I think that's such a big part of this community, is especially because of what you said about how it is in some ways a very invisible illness, and I think finding that community and bringing that community together, and this podcast is really an extension of that, because what I want to do is try to share these inspiring stories of people like yourself with people all over the world, so that there is that feeling of belonging to this group. And I think, I think that gives you a lot of confidence and power, and I hope that's
100%.
That's what we're doing here.
Yeah, no,
otherwise,
I know you are, and this is
for
hugely important. Having platforms like this to talk about it and to create the community. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about some of the work you're doing and how you've managed to sort of tailor the work you're doing to sort of work within your lupus day.
Well, most of the time I just tell my lupus that it's not allowed to do anything to get in the way of what I'm doing.
Right.
But I just I'm getting ready to release my first feature film that I shot during the pandemic. We shot on 35 millimeter and 16 millimeter. I work a lot with Kodak, and kind of fell into that community. So that's coming out, and I direct a lot of foreign language dubs for Netflix. And I'm doing my first Disney Plus title, which is really exciting. And again, you never know how that's going to like happen. There's so many different jobs in this industry. But I started my career as a director by directing everyone else's short project, which is interesting because a lot of people create short form content to showcase their own things. And so I would get hired by writers and producers and actors to come in and direct these things. And that turned into a career that sustained me for years. And then I started to go, I should probably, I'm a writer myself. I should probably write and direct some of my own stuff. Yeah. But yeah. And coming into.
So let me talk to you about let me talk to you about doing your first feature, because when we did our first feature, I remember thinking beforehand, wow, this is going to be a ridiculous amount of time and energy and focus that I'm going to need to have for, every minute you're out there is costing you thousands of dollars, or costing the budget thousands of dollars. So what's that like gearing up for? I don't know how many days and weeks you shot, but give us an idea of sort of that timeline and how you manage that.
I will say this. The pandemic gave me ample time to prep because I couldn't really do anything else. So that sort of assuaged some of the like the actor nightmare, like getting there and not knowing what you're going to say or do or whatever. It was a big undertaking. I not only wrote it and directed it, but I also starred in it and produced it. And it was the first time in 120 projects that I'd ever thought to direct myself. But it was a really in-depth look at grief. So it was a very intensely emotional role. And I did have thoughts of like, what am I going to do if I have a flare up? Like, what am I, and I didn't thank God I didn't, but it was, but I think I was very careful, I was very strict about what I was putting into my body before in terms of inflammation and inflammatory stuff. And I made sure I slept, and not while I was shooting, obviously, because I can never sleep when I'm directing anything. But yeah, it was kind of gearing up for a battle, and we shot it in both Texas and LA. And in Texas, we were shooting with my family place, the Flashback family, the Memories. So we were down on the Gulf, the Gulf Coast, and so we did that. So there was a lot of driving, and then coming back to LA and shooting during the pandemic. And Robert Pine was my co-star, and he's older, and I was very, very nervous about anyone getting sick. And we were lucky; we had no infection, no COVID stuff. But it's still like that was the other added. You're like,
right.
Oh, okay,
on top of all the other
weeks,
stuff,
and
right.
You're like, please, no one go.
Yeah. So 3 weeks, and you're talking how many hours a day to people who don't know what shooting a feature is like?
It was like 18 or 19 hours a day because I was producing as well. So, I'm up, and then I'm on set. But we're 12 hours on set, and I was wearing all of those hats. So I was on camera, and then also, figuring everything out with my DP and my script supervisor, all my producers and all of that. And then going home and trying to figure out, and calls about the budget, replacing crew members, and like, it was, yeah. It was a lot.
And after you finished it, well, first of all, when can we see it? What's the name?
It's Bolivar. Details. It's called Bolivar, and the Bolivar Peninsula is right at the border of Louisiana and Texas. So it's southeast. It's called Bolivar, and we had one screening. The Key West Film Festival. I have won 2 years in a row in the short, category. And so they did an alumni spotlight in November, which was really, really lovely. But we're kind of figuring out what we're going to do. Well, we are going to have an LA premiere, so you will have to be there.
All right. We're going to let our audience know
please.
for sure.
I don't know when that, we haven't scheduled that yet, but it's going to be a big fun to do. And then we'll do one in Houston. And I'm hoping that the film finds its sort of placement in the festival circuit. So that's kind of where we are right now. And then of course we'll sell it. And, you know, hopefully it'll be on Netflix or Hulu or something like that. So that's the plan.
Fantastic. And so tell me, after the process was over, did you have a big crash, a big physical relief? No,
thank
you just
God.
kept going.
Yeah, no, I didn't. And I will say this, I mean, I respond so well to the hydroxychloroquine. It really does help everything. And if I am on top of it, and if I'm exercising, and I remember that even if I'm feeling stiff or tired, I still need to go for a walk, or I need to take a yoga class. I mean, that makes all the difference in the world. There's something interesting about being stagnant. You know, it's almost better for me to be constantly moving, because, and that's kind of interesting. And, you know, when you're working on the dubs and stuff, and I'm sitting all day and I'm very focused, I have to really be on top of like going for a walk and, you know,
Yeah. No, I always say that too. I think when you get diagnosed with lupus, there's that choice you can make. You know, do I rest every time I'm tired, or do I, you know, push myself out of that comfort zone? And I think everybody has to handle it differently, and you have to sort of, you know, listen to your doctors and all of that. But I think for me, just, you know, making sure I take that step out the door, you know, has always been motivating, but also physically, you know, get your engine going. 100%. And I think once the car's on, hopefully, you know, you're not doing damage, but
you think about like, I mean, I think about my first waking up at 11, swollen stiff. And then by the time we got to the emergency room and everything like that, I was like, I had more, you know, mobility. And so again, those 10 years and it could have been horrible. I mean, it could have been kidney involvement. It could have been anything. And that would have been a very, very tragic and very different story. And I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now. But, you know, learning the things that helped my body naturally, not knowing I had a disease, you know, like taking a cool bath, you know what I mean? And then like for the rash and stuff like that. And, you know, learning what to do to feel better, I think has served me quite a bit, you know. And I was a dancer. I mean, you know, so I mean, in college, I think we danced something like 12 hours a week or 15 hours a week, you know. So I was always very active as a young woman. Yeah.
All right. Before we go, I want to, cause I read this in your bio, and I want to know about your children's book. And then, cause I think that'll be uplifting. Yes. I hope. I don't know. Maybe it's a horribly depressing children's book. I don't know, but
it's called Celia and the Witches. And it was at Barnes and Noble for a while, around 2009, 2010, 2011. And I probably should put it back on Amazon, but you know, life, you just, you know, but it's about a little girl who has a nightmare, and she wakes up, and these witches have put her in a frying pan. So it kind of starts off a little, you know, like Baba Yaga. So she wakes up, and her mom and dad come in, and they're getting calm and back to sleep. And her father says, you know, good night. And she says, well, wait, Dad, what if I can't get back? What if I fall asleep and I get stuck in this nightmare and I can't get back? And he says, well, then you teach those witches a lesson, right? So she does end up falling back asleep and getting into this dream. And she gets their wand, and she makes it her size, and she turns them into snails. She rides their cat. She gets back to she creates a little door and gets back to her bedroom, and she climbs up the banister and rides her lizard. So she gets back in her room, she climbs up the banister, she gets her lizard out. And anyway, she rides her lizard, and then she gets back to bed, and she wakes up in the morning, and it's been raining, and she can't find her lizard, and the lid is off. And then she walks out on her back steps and there are 3 unforgettable snails. So was it real or was it not?
Huh.
So I think it's an empowering, yeah.
Obviously I didn't know the plot, but I can tell you it's a perfect way for us to wrap this up, because that, to me, I see a lot of the metaphor there about lupus and about, taking control of your situation and, making lemonade out of lemons, like that kind of thing. And I think especially the relationship with your dad, which we talked about before, I think that's really powerful. So put it back on Amazon so we can all, I can get it for
you don't need to buy it. I'll drop
almost
it
6-year-old. And oh, okay, great. Special treatment for the podcast. I like it. All right. Well, Nell Teare, thank you so much. Be well, be healthy. And we really appreciate you joining us.
I'm so grateful to be included. So good to see you and to talk to you.
On behalf of the entire team at Lupus LA, we thank you for joining the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. Please tune in, spread the word, and come back for more inspiring lupus stories. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, wishing you good health, and to always remember, your story is our fight.